Mega Man is one of my favorite franchises of all time, but every single game has at least one weapon that is absolutely undoubtedly garbage. Now, I don't know how you possess a fully functioning gun arm that is, ineffective at best, but this happens all the time, at least once per game by Mega Man. So, since I have nothing better to do with my life, I went through every single Mega Man game, 1 through 11, and found the absolute worst weapon in that game. And by the way, for the one guy out there that likes Rockman and Forte, I do count that. I count every time I do these videos. To me, Rockman and Forte is like Mega Man 8.5, alright? So that is 1 through 11 by technicality, right? So, and I like that game. Real quick, let me just go ahead and say that the P weapon, which I assume stands for plain old dude, isn't going to be considered at any point in this video, but also, even if it was, I'm not sure it's even ever the worst weapon in any of the Mega Man games, so yeah. Also, we're obviously going to be going in chronological order because any other order would be stupid and make me cry and throw up. Mega Man 1 actually did pretty good with most of their weapons, especially considering it was the first Mega Man game ever made. But despite the beginner's luck, there are two weapons that clearly stand out for being a little bit suboptimal, which means they're bad. The two weapons I'm referring to are Bomb Man and Guts Man's weapons. So Guts Man's weapon literally will not do anything at all unless you are standing next to a specific giant brick, which does make sense considering all this power does is let you lift specific giant bricks, but it automatically causes the weapon to be a bit impractical. Bomb Man's weapon is at least functional at any point, but trying to actually kill enemies with this thing is like trying to go fishing with a bag of mouse traps. By the time your bomb actually blows up, you've more than likely completed the level, but even if you haven't, any enemies that may have been hit would have despawned. Honestly, at least Guts Man's weapon helps you get through an annoying boss in the Wily Castle, but Bomb Man's weapon only helps you beat Guts Man. And you might as well use plain old dude, because that's easier and faster. So despite Guts Man's weapon basically only being useful in one single room in the entire game, I'm still going to have to give the worst weapon of the game award to Bomb Man's bombs, man. Mega Man 2, despite being generally more well-polished than Mega Man 1, has a higher chance of having worse weapons due to the simple fact that Mega Man 2 introduced the idea of having 2 additional Robot Masters in the game, meaning there are now 8 instead of 6. Honestly, I think Mega Man 2 potentially has the most balanced weapons just because it has some of the best in the entire series along with some of the worst. We all know Metal Man's weapon could easily be considered the best Mega Man weapon of all time, which means it's probably not going to qualify for this specific list, but luckily there are other culprits. Flash Man's weapon kinda sucks because while it does freeze time, which is nice, you can't shoot or even really kill enemies while time is frozen, and also time is only frozen for like 15 seconds max. I can't say this is the worst weapon in the game though, because not only did Mega Man end up making worse knockoffs of this weapon throughout the future of the series, but there's also a specific spot in Mega Man 2 where it is intended for you to use your time-stopping powers in order to have an easier time beating the game. I personally never use it because I like the Quick Man lasers, but I can't call this the worst weapon when so many innocent Mega Man fans need this weapon just to beat Quick Man. Bubble Man's weapon is also fairly weak because it's slow, stays on the ground, and does nothing to 99% of enemies it makes contact with, but the 1% of enemies it does affect happens to contain the final boss of the game, which can only be injured by Bubble Ed, so we literally need it to beat the game. Also, Heat Man is weak to Bubble Ed, which is interesting, I guess. Crash Man's bomb weapon is kind of annoying to use, but undeniably useful. Heat Man's weapon is awkward to use because you have to charge it up, but it also one-hit kills Woodman in the American version and two-hit kills him in the Japanese version, so there's no way that's the worst weapon. Airman and Quickman's weapons are just undeniably decent, which means the worst weapon must go to Woodman's Leaf Shield. Now, in theory, this weapon is not too bad, and there are still a couple of areas where this weapon can shine, but like, it's just not good. It's slow, you can't run with it, meaning if you're going to shoot and run at the same time, you will never have the shield around you for more than a couple of frames, and your weapon energy will just run out. Admittedly, there is an area in Wily 2 where I use this item a lot just for convenience sake, but that's the only time in the entire game I use it, and you can also just use Flashman's weapon here with an even better effect. Woodman's weapon is also Airman's weakness, and you would think since Airman is fairly difficult, that in itself would add value to Woodman's weapon, but it's just straight up easier to beat Airman with the plain old dude than the Leaf Shield. So do with that information what you will, I suppose. But yeah, Leaf Shield is the worst weapon in Mega Man 2. Somebody please go tell the guy who wrote I can't defeat Airman, by the way, because he's gonna freak out if we don't tell him in time. Mega Man 3 has a lot of poopy weapons. Well, really it's just that none of the weapons are that spectacular. Needle Man and Magnet Man both have pretty decent weapons, but they're both just slightly better versions of your regular attack with a limited supply of ammo, so it's nothing too fancy. Shadow Man's Shuriken is a cool weapon, but the range is very bad, so it ends up functioning like a poor man's Metal Blade. I guess Search Snake is okay, but you can only attack enemies that are on the ground unless you shove your Mega Buster up their nose. Hard Man's weapon is strong but slow, and Spark Man's weapon is just too underwhelming to use without developing severe depression. Honestly, Spark Man's weapon is probably the worst weapon in Mega Man 3, but that would make this entire entry a lot more depressing than even your average Twitter scroll. This only leaves us with Gemini Man and Top Man's weapons. Gemini Man's weapon is that giant laser beam that looks really cool and bounces off all the walls. The problem is that it's slower than your local gas station's public Wi-Fi, and you can only have a single laser beam on screen at one time, which means if you miss your target, your laser will just bounce around the room, wasting time and lagging the game while you're unable to do anything at all except for just look at the boss while you probably die. This seems like more than enough logic to make it the worst weapon in the game, but the problem is Top Man's weapon is basically unusable. So this thing is just random. You're supposed to be able to jump in the air and spin like a top, which I guess is supposed to do damage, but it's horrible. First of all, you can't attack at all while standing or even running because your attack only works mid-air, but also it's basically random whether or not you take damage, do damage, or just run out of all of your weapon energy whenever you do end up landing a hit with this bogus weapon. As a kid, I didn't even think this thing worked. I thought either the game or the weapon was just glitched forever, since if you try pressing the shoot button without being in the air, nothing happens. But now that I'm adult and understand how this weapon is supposed to work, I hate it even more. Mega Man 4 is a great game with some pretty good weapons in it too, but according to the laws of yin and yang, there must also be at least a few absolute stinkers in there to maintain balance. Dustman has a weapon that's a cube of junk, which is reminiscent of the ones from Monsters Inc. It looks like a piece of garbage and honestly feels kind of lazy, but it does actually do quite a bit of damage. Brightman has a nerfed version of Flashman's power where you can do a flash and everything on screen freezes for a few seconds. I'm not sure why Flashman's power lasts for the entire health bar while Brightman's power only freezes time and flashes, but I wish they were swapped because it seems backwards, just with the words flash and like bright. I don't know. Like flash should be quick, right? Flash should be the one that's like limited and not your entire health. I don't know, never mind. Brightman actually did improve the general ability somewhat though by letting you fire your gun while time is frozen, unlike Flashman's poopy weapon. Toadman's weapon makes it rain acid that kind of hurts, but only a little bit. Like even the boss that's weak to this weapon has to sit there and get soaked for a good several minutes before they explode. But honestly, I think Skullman's pathetic shield is the worst weapon in Mega Man 4, which is very depressing considering how cool of a design Skullman has. Now in Rockman 4 Minus Infinity, which is a ROM hack for the game, the Skull Shield weapon is changed to make you go very fast while equipped, and even there the weapon isn't amazing, but it makes me actually enjoy using a shield weapon, which is a seldom occurrence in Mega Man. But in good old Mega Man 4, the shield just sucks. Like, I generally don't like shield weapons in Mega Man, but this has got to be one of the worst ones out of all of them. And trust me, I did not want to have 2 shield weapons show up within the first 4 entries, but it's just complete cheeks. I can't ignore it. But then again, for it to somehow be worse than Toadman's weapon, it's got to be cheeks, right? I mean, come on, Toadman's weapon is bad enough. Mega Man 5 has so many bad weapons that every single weapon from this game ties for the worst weapon for both Mega Man 5 and the entire series. Alright, I'll do it for real, guys. I wasn't lying though when I said they were all bad, so let's do a speed rant and then collect ourselves before we decide which of these is the most offensive atrocity. Gravity Man's weapon sucks because all it does is turn some enemies' gravity the other way, which does kill them, but like, it sucks. It doesn't even kill everybody. Not even a proper screen wipe. Starman's weapon is another doo-doo shield. Stone Man's weapon is so poorly crafted, I'm convinced it was done as a joke by the developers of the game. It basically spawns 3 rocks in a spiral pattern, but you'd have an easier time hitting mosquitoes out of the air with raisins than you would actually trying to land a hit with these stupid things. Crystal Man's weapon is okay, I guess, but it's still weird. Napalm Man's weapon is basically just grenades shaped as peanuts, which already makes me mad, but it's also awful because the range is horrible and they just pathetically bounce on the ground a couple of times as a means of traveling. Ridiculous. Wave Man's water weapon cannot leave the ground, which sucks since most of the enemies are in the air. Gyro Man's weapon is okay, but it usually goes up and off screen before hitting anything, which defeats the purpose of using something other than your Mega Buster. And the worst and most offensive excuse for a weapon is Charge Man's Kick. This weapon works the same way as Top Man's, but instead of having to be in the air and spin, you have to be on the ground sliding. Also, this weapon doesn't even really work and you just end up taking damage 9 times out of 10. Despite Charge Man's weapon being the clear worst, it's honestly baffling how every bad Mega Man weapon concept ever managed to weasel its way into Mega Man 5 to the point where I have an easier time making choices in Detroit Become Human than I do during the actual weapon select screen in Mega Man 5. But yeah, Charge Man's Kick can suck my balls. Oh wait, Mega Man 6 is the most polished Mega Man game on the NES, which would lead me to believe the weapons must be more balanced. And well, you know what, that's actually right. There aren't many weapons that are great, but there also aren't many weapons that are totally garbage. This game does have another one of those flash the screen for a second and cause something minuscule to happen weapons, which you can get from beating Centaur Man. I'm not going to say these kinds of weapons are necessarily bad, but I certainly don't like them. They don't always work, they seem kind of weird, they use too much weapon energy, and worst of all, this isn't even the worst weapon from Mega Man 6. Most of these weapons are just mediocre and do what they're supposed to do with some quirky little feature that differentiates them from the Mega Buster, like for example Nightman's spike thing that's a short-ranged boomerang-esque attack, Flame Man's weapon is one of those lob shots that spawns a flame tower on the ground, Blizzard Man's weapon tries as hard as it possibly can to dodge every single enemy you want to kill, and Wind Man's weapon usually doesn't work. But the worst weapon by far is unsurprisingly a shield weapon which you get from Plant Man. Yeah, this weapon sucks. I'm sorry to all those Mega Man shield weapon community members out there, but shields in Mega Man don't usually work that great since the shield more often than not does very little damage, but also gets disintegrated at first contact with an enemy or their attack. This shouldn't be surprising to any Mega Man 6 fans though, because it's pretty clear Plant Man's entire design was based around making you as annoyed as possible, so having a flimsy shield as a weapon is par for the course. I mean seriously, if you think it's possible to think of a more tedious Mega Man 6 Robot Master than Plant Man, you're out of your mind because you just can't, man. The NES games have been officially looked at, and it turns out Mega Man weapons that flash and Mega Man shield weapons are not good, and with shields at least that's not surprising considering they just die in one hit and they have their own weapon bar, so why even use that? But anyway, practical questions aside, it's time to look into the weirder Mega Man games, so let's do that before we realize what we're truly getting ourselves into with life. Mega Man 7 was the first classic Mega Man game to appear on a console other than the original NES, and with the improvements of the Super Nintendo, Capcom also decided to improve some of the weapons you get from defeating Robot Masters. Of course, Mega Man 7 started that stupid thing where you only get to choose the first 4 bosses until you beat those guys, only to be greeted by the final 4 bosses, which in all honesty does take away some value from a few of these weapons since you aren't able to get them as early. But this is one of the only Mega Man games where I think every single weapon is at the very least good. Also, as a side note, I recently found out there's a password you can put in that lets you choose all 8 Robot Masters from the start without having to beat any of them, but since no one told me about this until I was 21 years old, I'm just going to count using passwords as cheating. The Junk Shield weapon is the first shield weapon I've ever seen that's not only not garbage, but actually extremely good. This could arguably be the best weapon from Mega Man 7 if I'm being honest, but that's for another video. Freeze Man's weapon is just a significantly upgraded version of Blizzard Man's weapon from Mega Man 6, which is pretty nice. Cloud Man just gives you a regular ball of electricity to mess around with, Turbo Man gives you flame wheels, Slash Man gives you the ability to slash, and Vampire Man, Shade Man, gives you this weird sound attack that gains power when bouncing off of walls, which I think is honestly a really cool idea. Unfortunately, this cool idea is actually used to exploit how the game functions and can be used to one-hit kill a few bosses, but if you're asking me, that just makes this weapon even better. So really, the only weapon in Mega Man 7 that is not amazing is Burst Man's weird bubble weapon. This weapon still isn't bad or anything, it's just worse than the other ones. You shoot a bubble that of course has bubble physics, which makes your attack very slow and hard to aim, but luckily for Mega Man, there is a bomb carefully crafted inside of every single one of these bubbles. So basically, this weapon is just what Japan tried to do to the US during World War II with their bomb balloon things. But I don't think that ended up working out very well for Japan, so this is the worst weapon in Mega Man 7 by far. Mega Man 8 once again manages to make its way into my life, which is infuriatingly rage-inducing to say the least, but we have a job to do. Mega Man 8 again copies Mega Man 7's 4 bosses at a time idea, which automatically makes every weapon lose 1 cool point, adding yet another reason to hate Mega Man 8. Some of you may be thinking that the ball weapon you get at the very beginning of the game is the worst weapon, but not only do I personally consider that to be more of an item than a weapon, but more importantly, it's actually extremely useful because you can use it to jump higher than normal. Well, okay, you you probably can't, and I definitely can't, but if you're one of the 4 or 5 people who manage to put thousands of hours into playing Mega Man 8, then maybe you're lucky enough to pull it off. Maybe. That aside, I honestly don't really like any of the weapons for Mega Man 8 to the point where I don't think I ever use any of them unless I happen to be fighting a boss who is allergic to one of the weapons I have. They all admittedly look really cool when using them, but they feel like they should be way more powerful than they are. Or maybe I just hate Mega Man 8, who knows. Either way, in terms of the worst weapon, I'd have to say it's Aquaman's water because it literally turns Mega Man's Mega Buster into a water gun that you can just buy from Walmart. Also, this probably looks the lamest out of all of the Mega Man 8 weapons, but again, I could be biased since I hate Mega Man 8. At least that's what I would say if Aquaman's water balloon wasn't actually one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game. If you watched my other video, you would have been ready for that switcheroo. But you didn't, so you got fooled. The real worst weapon for Mega Man 8 is Tengu Man's tornado hold because I mean, come on, when are you gonna have a use for that thing? Seriously? This is so inconvenient to use. Why is this a weapon? Rockman and Forte, more commonly known as Mega Man in Base in the West, is one of my favorite Mega Man games, which you guys may not understand since I hate Mega Man 8, but just let a man have an opinion every once in a while, alright? This game has a lot of really cool weapons, with some of my personal favorites in terms of creativity in the entire series. For example, I really like the ice wall weapon you get from Cold Man since it seems very unorthodox and counterintuitive to use, but the more you mess around with it, the more uses you'll end up finding. Mega Man also can use air bending with Tengu Man's weapon, shoot a giant drill that turns into a bunch of smaller but just as deadly drills, shoot cards that go through walls that bring you items, make shadow clones, shoot bombs, and much more. But there's one weapon I've never liked, which is the flamethrower weapon. Again, this is a really cool idea, and I do enjoy seeing Mega Man wielding what is basically a flamethrower on his arm, but in terms of usefulness, this just ain't it. I've seen a couple of Mega Man noobs try to claim that the electric weapon you get from Dynamo Man that clears the screen of enemies is by far the worst, but if you're actually a Mega Man expert such as I, then you would know that exact lightning weapon is used for frame perfect and pixel perfect zips used to skip some of the longest and most tedious stages of the final levels during speedruns, so if anything, that's probably one of the best weapons in the game. But while the flamethrower is fun to use and cool to look at, it just is not powerful and will get you killed more often than not. But the flamethrower does turn into bubbles if you use it underwater, which follows the laws of physics, which is yet again another reason I prefer Rockman and Forte to Mega Man 8. Ugh. Mega Man 9 is of course infamous for bringing Mega Man back into the 8-bit dimension, but unbeknownst to the developers, they also ended up continuing the previous old habits that has since been dropped, most notably making the shield weapons terrible again. Yeah, every weapon in Mega Man 9 is honestly pretty decent with the exception of Jewel Satellite, which is a shield weapon. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty depressing not only putting another shield weapon as the worst from the game, but even more depressing knowing that Mega Man 7 had the perfect shield weapon that could have been used as a blueprint for future Mega Man games, but it just wasn't. I mean, I don't even know what else to say here. Like, maybe if the shield could just shield you from spikes, or even maybe make you walk faster or something, it could be redeemed, but it just doesn't do anything even close to that. It just sits there on Mega Man, waiting for something to hit it. This shield weapon is better than the shield weapons from the first 6 Mega Man games, sure, but it's still the same thing with a fresh coat of paint. Trust me guys, I really wanted to say Plug Ball was the worst weapon, because I mean, look at that stupid thing, but Jewel Satellite is just straight up too mediocre and useless to ignore. But I do hate Plug Ball. That thing, look at it. I mean, even if that's a good weapon, look at that thing. I don't want to use that. If that's the best weapon in the game, I wouldn't use it because it's so stupid and ugly. Mega Man 10, otherwise known as Mega Man X in Rome. Wait, what? The whole time Mega Man X was just a spin-off series? Are you joking? Well, anyway, Mega Man 10 has another poopy shield weapon, but I am contractually required to stop using those as the worst weapon, so we are not allowed to settle for that. Also, coincidentally, Mega Man 10 has an even worse weapon that I would have chosen regardless of that being true. That weapon is Thunderwool. I mean, you shouldn't really expect much from a boss named Sheepman, but this just feels like an inside joke by the development team. I'm referring to Sheepman as a whole, of course, and not just the weapon. Every other weapon in Mega Man 10 is actually pretty amazing and surprisingly unique, but Thunderwool not only doesn't make any sense, but also is just designed poorly. It's literally designed to not hit anything. Look at it. Look at the path of this weapon. What are you gonna hit? What are you hitting with this thing? The only practical use for this weapon is to kill bosses who are allergic to it, but if Thunderwool was literally anything else, that would not change. Meaning Thunderwool possesses literally the bare minimum amount of usefulness in Mega Man 10. Hitting enemies with this weapon is like trying to hit your friend across the classroom with a paper airplane. Even if it looks like you were close and can do it, no amount of time will allow you to accurately aim this thing to a target. I mean, seriously, even if you manage to train yourself to memorize the hitbox patterns of this weapon, you still have to wait a few seconds for it to activate after you shoot it, because Capcom wants you to know that just by using Thunderwool at all, you are wasting your time. Mega Man 11 is a game that's mere existence gives me hope to keep going in life. One of my favorite parts about this game specifically is that when Mega Man has a weapon, instead of just being a different color palette, he's also dressed up cosplaying as the boss whose weapon it's from. This is of course very minuscule, and some hardcore Mega Man fans even hated this because it quote unquote breaks the tradition or whatever, but I mean, this just looks cool. Stay mad, I guess? I don't know. I still love the simplicity of the older Mega Man games where you do just change colors, but for a new Mega Man game that almost acted as a reboot, I think this is one of those perfect extra additions that makes the majority of fans happy despite the loud few who want to complain about everything. The weapons in this game are also a little bit ridiculous, with Blockman's weapon being the first most people get, and it just summons a bunch of bricks from the sky to land right in front of you. Certainly effective, but I don't know, maybe it's a little bit overkill if anything. Mega Man 11's weapons are just all super fun to use though, even if they aren't necessarily the most effective, and I think it was designed like this on purpose, so I'm going to keep that in mind when bringing up the worst. It certainly couldn't be Impact Man or Bounce Man's weapon, since they're both not only fun to use but also extremely powerful. Fuse Man, Blast Man, Torch Man, and Tundra Man's weapons are all useful as well, but maybe slightly less so than the previously mentioned weapons, a little bit. The only weapon that stands out as lacking in any way at all is Acid Man's weapon, only because it's not as powerful as some of the others and it's a little bit slow. I think Acid Man's weapon also isn't that fun to use unless you just like pretending to shoot basketballs at enemies, but I still don't think this weapon is bad or anything, just worse than every other weapon from the exact same game by a significant margin, but not bad. It's not a bad weapon, but Acid Man's weapon does at the very least win the coolest Mega Man cosplay, because I feel like it makes Mega Man look like a G.I. Joe villain, which that's cool, I guess. I know he's a good guy, but I don't know. Mega Man can cosplay too, right guys? Don't you want to see Mega Man cosplay? Let the guy cosplay. Let Mega Man cosplay, guys. Come on. You better donate to Mega Man's GoFundMe so he can go to Comic-Con next year, guys. Otherwise, he's not going to dress up as a cool cosplay. He's going to look like this. Well, we've done it, gamers. We now know the absolute worst weapon from every Mega Man game in the entire classic series, as well as the best weapon from every Mega Man game in the entire classic series. My work here is finally done.
Wait. Now hold on. What about Mega Man X games? Huh?
Oh, yeah,
Master the pack, no trap lord. Menace and Venice, turn your bitch up into a lost cause. Beauty and the beast with the clip, be cautious, caution. Murder the pussy from city floors. Oh shit, I leave them corpses, I metamorphosis, I'm fancy. Lodge your head in the window of Porsche. Core listening to course, they got an abortion. Slide in the pussy for riddling and aborting. I'm laughing, I need a mask, straight gas with caskets. Preaching a murder.
Don't include that, you son of a gun.